QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021 Deposits from Undeposited Funds. Let's get into it with Intuit's QuickBooks Pro Desktop 2021. Here we are in our Get Great Guitars practice file homepage. We currently have the Open Windows open. You can open the Open Windows by going to the View dropdown and selecting the Open Windows list. We're now going to be making deposits. We're going to be making deposits that we got from either the receive of the payment, that we received the payment after creating an invoice typically, or the create sales receipts. Those two forms then we're increasing the undeposited funds as opposed to going directly into the checking account. We can see the indication of that in the deposit screen over here as we end off our little flow chart, which has a number 5 on it, indicating that there are 5 items that have come from either the receive payments or the create sales receipts and have gone into the undeposited funds as opposed to going into the checking account. So let's open up our accounts, our financial statements. I'm going to the reports up top, company and financial. I'm going to go on down to the profit and loss standard. We're going to be opening up our balance sheet. Let's change the dates up top from the customized report so we can get that range 01/01/21 to 12/31/21. That'll help us when we zoom in and then say okay. So what's going to happen here is we're going to take some of the money out of the undeposited funds and we're going to go to the bank. So we're imagining now we've been collecting money. Now in this practice problem, we've used different kind of payment terms when we received the money. In other words, if I go back to the home page and I take a look at the receive payment form, we've received payments with these indications. Now, these indications don't really change what happens to the form when you record the transaction much, but it can give you an indication of what type of payment you have been receiving. Again, if you're using the undeposited funds cash, if you're using cash, you probably want to be using this undeposited funds kind of clearing account type of thing. If you're getting a check, then you may still want to use the undeposited funds if you're grouping the checks in such a way that will be different than individual checks, so that when you deposit them into the bank, they'll be in a lump sum. If you're doing credit cards, again, you'll have to talk to the credit card company and make sure that you're grouping them in the same way in your books as they will be on the bank statement so that you can reconcile. And if they're e-checks, you might not use undeposited funds because you might be getting checks directly from the bank in that case. And it's going to be shown in the bank in the exact same format as the amount that's on the payment. And therefore, you may not want to go through undeposited funds. It might be an unnecessary added step to do so. So we might have multiple of these grouped together, and we might be grouping them together in undeposited funds. But what I want you to imagine then is you're taking the cash transactions that you have been receiving throughout the time period, and then you're going to the bank at the end of the day and putting it into the bank, and you want to record the bank deposit in the same format that you will in your books as it will be in the bank. Therefore, it will be showing on the bank statement, which you will then have to reconcile at the end of the month. So I'm going to close this back out. So we're going to then go in. So that means let's go into the record deposits. And when I do that, those 5 items will then be indicated up top. So now we see those 5 items that are shown. These are the 5 items that that went through undeposited funds. Now I'm going to check off this one, and we'll do a couple different deposits here. So I'm checking off the one with the 420 and the one with the 5,180. That adds up to the 5,600. I'm going to say okay. So there we have it. Now this is going to be a normal deposit screen. Now if you were just using a deposit and you weren't taking it from those items that are going through undeposited funds, you could have just closed out that prior screen and entered the information directly into basically this screen. For example, we started off with a couple deposits like the owner putting money into the company. If the owner was putting money into the company, you might use the deposit form again, and you could say receive from and say who it's going to be received from, and then assign the accounts down here, give the memo, and so on and so forth. But that prior screen is going to help you to go through the undeposited funds. So that populates here automatically. So we got receive from, string music, that's coming from the prior forms we had created. It's going out of undeposited funds because that's like the clearing account that it was put into. And then we have the total on the right-hand side. We want to deposit this as, I'm going to increase the date to the 17th. So we'll add it to the 17th. This is going to be increasing the checking account, decreasing the undeposited funds. Let's go ahead and save and close that. Save and close back to the balance sheet. If we then go into the checking account, double clicking on the checking account, we see that we have that deposit there, the 5,600, double clicking on that. And there's going to be our deposit screen. Let's go ahead and close this back out. Close this back out. The other side's going to be in undeposited funds. Double clicking on undeposited funds, we see the decrease of, once again, that 5,180 and the 420, breaking them out individually here. So you can see the date of the deposit is the same, but they're going to break it out each line item individually. If I click on either one of these, we'll go to the same deposit form, seeing the detail up top, total deposit at the 5,600. Closing this back out, closing this back out. There is no effect on the income statement. All we're doing is taking it from one basically cash account, one asset account, and putting it into the other asset account. Let's do it again. We're going to go back over to the home page and do it again. So we have 3 left here. So we had 5 before. We input 3. So we have 3 left. So I'm going into the deposit screen. It gives me that pop-up once again for those 3 items. That indicates that it's going through the undeposited funds. These 3 items are. Notice that if I want to make a deposit that isn't related to these 3, I could just simply close out this window and then just enter the deposit as I normally would. When I do that, when that is the case, as we saw with the prior deposits that we had for like the owner putting money into the company or a loan, I typically wouldn't use the deposit form, but go directly to the check register and enter those directly in the check register. When you double click on them from the forms, like the balance sheet, it will still go to a deposit form, but I find that as an easier data input. If I'm using the full accounting process and I'm taking these out of undeposited funds, then that's when I would use this deposit form so that I can utilize this function here and be able to, check these off and have this flow through process. So I'm going to check the rest of them off, 8,000, 5,000, and the 7,500 for a total deposit of that 20,500. We're going to say okay. We'll make that as of the 18th, let's say, and I'm going to go ahead and deposit that. So I'm going to say save and close. And then let's check this out again, going back up to the balance sheet. And if we go into the checking account, double clicking the checking account, we see once again that 20,500 there on the deposit side. Double clicking on that, we see then our deposit. Closing this back out, closing this back out. The other side's in undeposited funds. It has now disappeared, the undeposited funds, because it's going back to 0. So because it's at 0, it's not being displayed here. Now, if we want to see items that have our 0 balances in them that have been used throughout the time period, there's a couple ways that we can do that. I like to look at the trial balance for that. So I'll typically go to the reports up top, go down to the accounting and taxes and trial balance, adjusting the dates from 01/01/21 to 12/31/21, and then we see these 0 balances here. That's a 0 there, but it has activity in it, or it has had activity in it. So if I double click on that, we could see the detail. So it's nice to have some of those 0 balances in the report if they have had activity, so that we can use that zoom feature and be able to see the detail of it. So as we do so, we see it once again broken out between these 3 items. But if I double click on any one of them, we will see both the detail and the total of that 20,500. Closing this back out, closing this back out. Just for the recap, if you're following along, this is our balance sheet. So you can check your numbers on the balance sheet here. You could check the numbers on the P&L. The P&L is the same, so I won't go there. And then you could check the numbers on the trial balance, which is probably a little bit easier of a place to check the numbers on.